Hello and welcome to the seventh lecture of our Advanced Analytics for Data Science and Machine Learning program. In this lecture, we're going to discuss about built-in functions in Python. In fact, there are so many built-in functions in Python. We don't intend to discuss all of them in this lecture. We will discuss those functions which are really required for us from a data science, machine learning, or analytics perspective, right? So what are these built-in functions? Built-in functions are somewhat like shortcuts to me, where it makes sure that you do not write many lines of codes to get the results. Rather, you use a word or two keywords or built-in functions to get the same results, which you will get after writing 2 or 3 lines of codes, right? So since we are going to deal with analytics and machine learning, data science, it's important that we know some basic functions on how to manipulate and handle numericals, text data, so on and so forth. Okay, so we will begin with such a function, a few functions which deals with numbers. Before we get there, I would want to show you something. Let me clear the canvas in the previous lecture. Okay, so what are we talking here? We're talking about some basics. We all know that we have dealt with it in the previous lectures, but let me once again go there. The different types are integers, right? Then we will have float and then strings, right? Integer is what we call it. Is integer is represented by int, float is represented by float itself, string actually is represented using str, right? So what's an integer? An integer is a numerical value. Say for instance 5, this is an integer, right? What could be a float? Float is nothing but decimals. So if I have to express something in decimals like 5.45, it's float for me. And string is something what I want to write a text or something like that. So it could be just one single word or a collection of words like Tom is my name, right? Something like this. So you see that you may have noticed I have put here one single inverted comma and here I have used double quotes. So one thing what you need to keep in mind is that whenever you are writing a text, and if you want Python to recognize it as a string or a text, always use inverted commas. And the next thing is that, when you use single inverted comma to begin, ensure that you close it with single inverted comma. And if you're using double, you always need to ensure that, you close it with a double. Do not use a mixture like, you start with one and close with two. This will confuse the Python and it throws out an error. Python doesn't like it, right? So so these are the three things what we will quickly discuss on. What are the built-in functions around these things? And then obviously these are all variable types, right? Type of the numericals, right? Type of the variable. It could be an integer variable, float variable, or a string variable. If you want Python to tell after typing something in the cell, what type of variable is that, you have a very good built-in function, something called as type, right? type, and then ask something like this, type of the variable X. And that's going to throw either it is an integer, string, float, etc. There are many types, right? So it can throw what type is that, right? Python can tell you that as well. Okay, so now let's practically look at how does it work in Jupyter Notes. Let me introduce one row for this. So let's say that I want to declare a variable and the value of that variable is 3. So x is equal to 3, right? So when I declare x is equal to 3, if I want Python to tell me whether 3 is an integer, float, or string, whatever, right? I can always use this formula, type, type, and then open a bracket and close a bracket and put x there. And always remember, hit shift and enter. Only then that's equivalent to run. So only then you will get the result. So type x, shift and enter is going to give me integer. That means Python is telling me that what you have assigned as a value 3 is an integer, right? So for instance, if I change this to say 3.6, x is equal to 3.6, and then rerun it, shift enter. Now Python is telling me this is a float, right? So I can do this way as well, where I say that y is equal to Tom. See, I told you that this is the error, right? I started off with one single quote and I ended with two. So it is showing me a syntax error. So what I need to do is if I'm starting with one, I need to close it with one as well. So y is equal to term. And then I'm going to ask Python to tell me what's the type of y, what type of variable is y, right? And then Python is going to tell me that's a string variable, right? So always ensure that, you follow the syntax, otherwise you will get an error, right? So double open with single quotes, close with single quotes, open with double quotes, close with double quotes, right? So let's say that, I want to declare a numeric value as a string value. So what do I do? So I'll say that z is equal to, so let's say double inverted, double quotes, I started off and then there's a numerical 5, right? So if I run this, shift and enter, and if I ask Python, how have you recognized this? What do you treat this variable as? Then, although it is a numerical value, but we have put in quotes, right? So then Python is going to tell you that I've considered this as a string value, right? So these are the different types of values available, right? And the different variable types. So I can always ask Python to change, say, let's take this example, z is equal to 5, right? So I've put in inverted commas. So that is Python is treating this as a string. So maybe I may want to change this from a string to probably a float or an integer. Do not worry, it's very easy. So I have this formula int, right? Int function, and then put z here, open the brackets and write z and hit shift enter. That's going to convert. See, z was a text or a string data. Now it is converted it into a integer, right? So now if I want to store it, so if I want to say type of, let's say that I want to store this, say I'll store this as a variable c is equal to int z. And then if I ask Python to tell me the type of c here, shift enter, that's going to tell me that's integer, right? So obviously, if I want to change it to float, that's very well possible, right? So I just need to change this as, say, d is equal to float c, right? So d, if I ask for d is going to throw out 5 point, right? 5.0. This has become a float now, right? If I want to change this to a string, I can always say that d string d. So that's get converted to a 5 and you can store it in a new variable. So all these manipulations are possible. And then type is really important that, you use that to know what type of a variable, how Python has understood it as, to ensure that, we are using the right formulas, right? Say if you have a string and if you try to add two things, what will happen? Let's say that, x is equal to, say you entered it as 6, knowingly, unknowingly, right? Y is equal to, say, 7, right? So you're declaring y is x equal to 6 and y is equal to 7, and then you somehow ask Python to do x plus y for you. So it's throwing an error, right? Because 6 is not being recognized as a numeric value here. But what happens if I put 7 also as integer, string, and then just try and execute this? It's going to give me 67. So it is a concatenating effect, right? So obviously this answer is wrong, right? So if I do not recognize that and to take that, this is text and run my operations, I'm going to get a results like this. I'm going to get a result like z is equal to 67. So don't think that it is 67, because when you have 1 million transactions, right, you may not get time to validate each and everything. So ensure that, you treat your values and ensure that, Python is recognizing that column, the entire set of values, what you are interested in, as the way you want it to be. So do a quick check. Type is really, really important, and conversions are really, really important for you as well. Okay, I hope that you understood the basic functions, right? We wanted to discuss on integer type, float, string, and type. So that's interchangeability of integer to string, that string to float, float to, you can possibly do all these interchanging. You can use these built-in functions to interchange variable types as well. Okay, now let's get into simplifying arithmetic operations. Okay, so there are some built-in functions which can simplify the operation arithmetic operations. We did discuss on arithmetic operators yesterday, right? Plus, minus, modulus, floor division, so on and so forth. So one of the fine features of built-in functions is about rounding the numbers. Like for instance, x is equal to 7.87896. This is how you have defined it, right? Now it's a time where you've realized, okay, I don't want so many decimals. I would really want to limit my decimal size to probably 2 decimals. So what do? I have a beautiful formula available. So round is the built-in function which can do that operation for you. So round x comma, and you're going to tell that how many digits you need. Say like 2 digits, right? Round x to 2. So that's happened here. So 7.87896 has been rounded off to 7.2 decimals, right? 7 gets approximated to the next highest value. That's 7.88, right? So let's say what if I do not write anything as a second argument, say round x and then hit the button. It is going to approximate it to no decimals, and 7.8 get approximated to the next highest level of integer, and that's round's function. It will approximate it to the next highest level of integer, the very next level, right? So 7.87 is being approximated to 8 here. Okay, guys, before we proceed, I just want to give you a word of caution, right? We have a lot of built-in functions. When you type, if it is turning green, as I told you, built-in functions are already predefined functions, right? So when you start typing it, say for instance, when I type int, it turns green. So a green indicator says that there is a built-in function in Python available, right? So please stay away from that. Only use it when you want to get some results out of that function. Say for instance, if you are using any of these built-in function as a variable name, that's going to confuse Python. Python is not really going to appreciate it, but Python is not going to be angry with you. Python will just simply accept it, but it will misbehave when you are using that function for a later operation. So let's take an example of round. Say round, when I type, it's turning green, right? So when it turns green, that means that it is a built-in function. So let's say that, I am treating this particular thing, despite of this warning, I am taking this to the next level by assigning a value to it. Round is equal to 5. Python is a very obedient person. He is not making a ruckus. So he's just accepting what you're giving. So round is taken as 5. Say for instance, now you are asked to use round function to do the same operation, x to 3 decimals, right? When I do this, this is throwing me an error. Python is getting confused. I really don't know. Although I understand and approve that, I have a function, a built-in function called as round, but a couple of lines before you have already assigned a name or a value to me to round, for round. So what do I do now? So he is getting confused. So when you want to use round again, Python is definitely going to misbehave. So accidentally also, if you ever do this, ensure that, you erase all the memory of this by just going to the kernel, restart and clear output. So restart and clear output will ensure that, whatever memory is occupied by the sheet gets really erased. And then you need to run it from top so that, you get all the results what you like, right? So round, this particular line I'm going to delete, because again, if you run it again, Python is going to get confused. So I will just delete it. So round x is fine. That's going to give me 8. And round x comma 3 is going to give me 7.89. So the bottom line is built-in functions are to be just used for a purpose. Otherwise, please leave it alone, right? Do not use that as a variable name because it will confuse Python. Okay, so that's one thing about built-in functions and using that as a variable name. Okay, so don't do that. The next one is a beautiful function which talks about div mode. Yesterday in the operators, we were talking about divisions, right? And 2-3 variants of it. We did discuss on modulus, which gives you the remainder. And then, of course, the floor division was giving you the integer part of your quotient, right? Say if you want to get a division of 2 things, and then if you want to get the quotient, the integer part of the quotient and the remainder in one go, right? Rather than writing 2 lines of calculating percentage and double slash. there's a beautiful function available, dev mode. Okay, so if I want to do a dev mode, I just need to type dev mode and then give the first 8, say 16 divided by 4. 16 divided by 4. That's what I want. So it is giving me the quotient. The first part is the quotient, that is the integer part of the quotient, and second one is the remainder. So we can quickly validate that, right? 16 divided by 4, right? 16 divided by 4. Let's go back to our drawing board and let's say that 16 divided by 4. How does it work, guys? 16 divided by 4. See, 4 fours are 16, and that's 0. So this is the quotient, and then obviously this is the 0 is the remainder, and that's what you've gotten. Yeah, 4. Let's say that it's 16 divided by 5. So 16 divided by 3 and 1. So 16 divided by 5, if I have to do it ever, 16 divided by 5, that's going to be 3, 15, and then 1, right? So this is the quotient part. So if I have to borrow that, just put a 1, 0 there, and then 2, 3.2. So 3.2 and 10 is actually the quotient, but it gives you the quotient. The integer part of the quotient is something what it gives you, right? And that's exactly what you can see here. 3 and 1, 3 and 1 before you could do any borrowings, right? So 3 and 1, 3 and 1, guys. And that's very, very plain and simple. Div mode can be used for that purpose as well. Okay, the next one, very quick one, which is again very useful and is extensively used in Python programming, is instance. Guys, it's a very good function. It's a function for validation, right? Say if you want to validate in Python, you put a validation in Python to validate something. For instance, you have written something as x is equal to, say, x is equal to 9.8, right? Just put that away. And then I want to put a validation for this. That means I will ask Python, is instance x comma integer. So in this, what you're trying to do is instance, is x an integer or not? Please tell me, Python, right? So when you have millions of transactions and you have a column of, say, a particular type of numbers, say decimal numbers or float numbers, right? If you want to use that column, let's say that the theory is that those columns must have integer, right? If you are having float, you may not want to use that column, right? You may want to skip that column, or if it is having float, then you want to convert that into integer. There could be multiple situations like that. So you can use it here. So you can ask, is instance x an integer? And if you hit shift and enter together, that's going to give you false. That means it is not an integer, right? So if I ask that instance x is a float, that is going to give me true. Yes, it is. And this applies for text as well, strings as well. Is instance Tom is str? Yes, true. Tom is a string, right? And if you ask whether Tom is an integer, that'll throw that it is false. So I'm not giving you more examples. There are so many examples which we will use, complex ones also, when we do programming. We will learn it in an order. I don't want to jump to a next topic without covering the right basics for you. So just understand, this is the application, this is how the formula works, and this is the use of it. So you can logically put it for work when it's required. Okay. And then the next function we're going to talk about is the power function, right? So we've been discussing about raise to, power to, right? In our previous sessions. Say, for instance, you want to raise 2 to the power of 3. We said like the operator is 2 double stars and 3, which is going to give you 8, right? So that's another way of looking at it. Or otherwise you can use this function power 2 to the power 3, 2 comma 3, power 2 to the power 3, right? So that's going to throw 8. So these two things are similar. But if you give another argument, right? Say, for instance, you say power 2 to the power 3, and then whatever is the answer, give me the modulus of that with this number, right? So here, what does that mean? So it is going to give you 0. So what this means is that, 2 raised to 3 is equal to 8, and then give me 8 modulus 2, right? And that modulus gives you the remainder here, right? So 8 modulus 2. So this is how it works. And if I have to go back to the drawing board, I can show you very well. So I've written a code like this, right? Power 2 to the power 3, and then I have put 2. So that 2 raised to 3 is 8. This becomes 8, and this is my 2. So 8 modulus 2. So if I have to give 8 modulus 2, that's about 4 and 2, and this 4 and 8, right? This is 0. So this is something what we're talking about. My answer is 0, isn't it? My answer here is 0. So that's again another function which can be used, and it's very user friendly as well, right? So that's power function, guys. And the next function, what we're going to talk about is called as the range function. The range function is really difficult to visualize at this point in time, because if I use this function, you will not get an input or an output, but I want you to understand what do we mean by range function. So range function is typically used when you are using conditions, right? Controlled flow statements, your for loops, while loops, and all of these places where you want to do multiple iterations and give different values, and you want Python to generate a series of values, you can use the range function. Say if I say that, no, I'm just going to write something to you, for you. Say if I say range 2 to 10, right? So range 2 to 10. Range, why range is not getting picked up? Range, I need to clear up the memory once again. I think this kind of small problems can happen. Don't worry about it. This can be easily sorted, because somewhere, even if you have made some mistakes, Python generally gets confused, and it'll be a little reserved. Don't worry about it. So I'll say that range, say 2 to 10. So if I put this and run, see, see 2 to 10 was something wrong. That's okay. I think, this was probably, yes. Oh, yes. See, why it did not work? I want you to ensure that you all understand this. See, I was trying to write range here, and it did not pick up. Why? Because, RB, NB convert. This is a different type I was always talking about. So if I make it to codes, that's when, the functions will be taken. Anyways, so please ensure that, you do that always. So range 2 to 10, if I type, it's showing me range 2 to 10. What does this mean? So if you use range in an appropriate way in a control statement, it will generate values from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. This will be your output, right? So if you want to generate numbers from 2 to 100, you just need to use this appropriately. So I'm not giving you the example where we can use it at this point in time. Anyways, in the next lecture, we're going to discuss about this, how to use range statement. But the output and the syntax to use range statement is this, and the output what you can get is that if I use, if at all you use range 2 to 100, Python is going to develop or create the series starting from 2 to 99, all the way till 99, right? So you don't really need to sit, type, and give this. So if you want to check all values, how the expression happens, or how the response comes for each value starting from 2 to 100, you can use the range function. And this can go up to 1000, 1 lakh, depends on your requirement, right? So I cannot show it to you now. I can show, but you may not appreciate it. That is the whole purpose, right? Because I don't want to jump the guns. Otherwise I will have to write a for statement for you, which may confuse you at this point in time. So just understand it. We'll come back to it later. Okay, so this is the syntax, and this is the use, and this is how you will get the outputs for it. Okay, so far so good. Okay, and the next one we're going to talk about is the acceptance user inputs. That means so far what we've been doing is, we've been giving values, assigning values like x is equal to 9, y is equal to 3, right? So this will remain. Y is equal to 3, right? So x equal to 9, y is equal to 3. This is going to remain in the memory, right? So every time I run x, it takes the value 9. When I run y, it takes the value 3, unless I go ahead and change it. But what if you do not want this to happen? right? What if you want Python to take inputs every time you run it? That is when, acceptance of user inputs. It's very simple, right? So let's say that, X is equal to, you use input, right? Enter the value of X, right? And you can say that Y is equal to input, enter the value of Y, right? So these are two input functions you are defining, right? Built-in functions input you're using. So next time, whenever I run this line, Python is going to ask me, what value would you like to give to X? What value would you like to give to Y? And this text, what I have written here, can be of your choice. There is no particular format. You can put write, you can just simply write X, write Y, right? Whatever. But this message is something what you will get when you run this code. So write Y. So how will it help you? I will show that in a minute. So when I run this command, right? When I run the shift enter, so write X, so it is asking for a value, right? So if I just say that enter the value of X here, enter the value of Y, right? So if I run this again, the first thing what's going to happen, oh, this is getting hung, 1 second. This keeps happening sometimes, don't worry about it. Sometimes, when you're using such statements, Python, guys, you need to pay a little attention here. When it is showing as black, right, full black, that means your kernel is busy. So whatever you may write, Python will not agree to it, right? So it will ask you to wait till this become white. Okay, now it will work. So I'm going to just run it now. Okay, so it's asking enter the value of X. So we'll say that, okay, my value of X is 5. Okay, click again, enter the value of Y. So Y, I'll say that, 7. Okay, so you have told and you have assigned X is 5 and Y is 7. And then if you ask X plus Y, what will be the result? It's going to be a funny result, guys. X plus Y shows is 57. This is the concatenation we were talking about, right? So Python takes this input as text. By default, it takes as text, unless you specify that it should be considered something else. So how can you do it? This is where your built-in function of integer or float will come. So all you need to do is just write int and then put this entire thing as a function, right? So whatever you input for X will be considered as an integer, and similar thing can be done here as well. Integer and integer. So that means when I'm putting a value for Y, whatever the value, computer will treat that as an integer. So for X plus 7 will work only for an integer in the proper sense, right? If you are thinking of addition, that will work only in a situation where it's a numerical value, either an integer or a float. So let's see what is going to happen now. So so enter the value of X. So I may put a value of 6 here and then enter the value of Y, and I'm putting 7 here. So 6 plus 7 is something what I'm interested in. And I'm X plus Y. If I run it, it is giving me 13 now. Okay. So you can even put float here, or you can even float here. So your results, what you're going to get is definitely going to be in float. So what's the benefit of this, guys? The benefit is that, see, you got a result as float. So the benefit is that, this is kind of getting dynamic. So you are being asked each and every time, what is the value of X and what is the value of Y? It's like a calculator, right? It doesn't really go with the memory, what is a permanent memory or kind of a permanent memory where you assign a value. So whenever you run that program, that value gets picked up. But Python gives you flexibility that if you don't want to use those values at every time when you run the program, please ask me for an input and I will ask for your input, and that input will be taken for further calculations. So that's basically all about the built-in functions. Okay, so we covered some few basic functions now, basic built-in functions which are required for our further programming language. Okay, so I hope that you understood it, and I shall see you in the next lecture. And I'm providing this in the resources section of this lecture. So you can download it and do your practice. Ensure that you practice well before we move on to the next lecture. Okay, shall see you in the next lecture then.